Welcome back to Compassion Over Silence. I'm Rashida Saunders. Today we're continuing our conversation about leadership in part two of my reflection on completing the FBI-LEEDA Trilogy. For those who may not be familiar, the FBI-LEEDA Trilogy is a leadership development program that consists of 3-week-long courses: the Supervisor Leadership Institute, the Command Leadership Institute, and the Executive Leadership Institute. Over the course of 3 separate weeks, I sat alongside leaders from agencies and organizations across the country, discussing leadership, organizational culture, accountability, communication, employee wellness, ethical decision making, and what it means to lead people well. I originally enrolled because I wanted to grow as a leader. What I didn't expect was how often those conversations would lead me back to myself. Because while the trilogy focused on leadership, many of the lessons weren't really about leadership at all. They were about people, and they were about the work we have to do within ourselves before we can effectively lead anyone else. In part one, we explored some of the lessons that stayed with me throughout the FBI LEADA trilogy. We talked about the difference between authority and influence, the importance of credibility and trust, why people want to feel seen, valued, and respected, and how accountability, when rooted in care, can become a tool for growth rather than punishment. At its core, part one was really about a simple idea. Leadership isn't defined by titles, rank, or position. It's defined by the impact we have on the people around us. As I reflected on those lessons, I realized something. Most leadership conversations focus on how we lead others, but one of the most important leadership questions is much more personal. How do we lead ourselves? Because before we can build trust with others, we have to be trustworthy ourselves. Before we can ask others to grow, we have to be willing to grow ourselves. Before we can create healthy cultures, we have to examine what we're bringing into those cultures. Throughout the FBI LEADA trilogy, there was one message that appeared again and again. If you cannot lead yourself, you cannot effectively lead others. And if I'm being honest, that may have been the lesson that challenged me the most. Because for much of my life, I thought leadership meant taking care of everyone else. Today, we're talking about the hardest person you will ever lead: yourself. Because carrying it all quietly comes at a cost. As I reflected on everything I learned throughout this training, there was one lesson that stayed with me long after the training ended. It wasn't found in a leadership model. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a communication framework. It wasn't even about organizational culture. It was something far more personal and far more difficult. If you cannot lead yourself, you cannot effectively lead others. When I first heard that, I wrote it down. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that leadership isn't just about how we show up for other people. It's also about how we show up for ourselves. And if I'm being honest, that has been one of the greatest challenges of my life. I thought leadership meant carrying more, doing more, sacrificing more, giving more, helping more. I became very comfortable being the strong one, the responsible one, the dependable one, the fixer, the helper, the person who could figure it out, the person who could carry the weight. For a long time, those qualities served me well. They helped me survive difficult seasons. They gave me the resilience to keep moving when life felt overwhelming. They helped me build a career rooted in service. They helped me navigate motherhood, leadership, and responsibility. They helped me become someone others could depend on. And in many ways, they helped me become the person I am today. But what I didn't realize was that somewhere along the way, I had confused strength with self sacrifice. I had learned how to take care of everyone around me. I wasn't always taking care of myself. I knew how to ask other people how they were doing. I wasn't always honest about how I was doing. I knew how to encourage other people to seek support. I wasn't always willing to seek support myself. I knew how to carry difficult things. I didn't always know when to put them down. And eventually, life has a way of confronting us with the things we've spent years avoiding. For me, part of that journey happened through therapy. Therapy gave me something I didn't realize I needed: a mirror. Not a mirror that reflected how other people saw me, a mirror that reflected how I saw myself. It forced me to slow down, to examine patterns, to ask difficult questions, to challenge beliefs that I had carried for decades. Beliefs about strength, beliefs about vulnerability, beliefs about worthiness, beliefs about what it meant to be a leader. What I discovered was that many of the things that made me successful were also the things that were keeping me stuck: my independence, my self reliance, my ability to push through, my ability to keep functioning no matter what was happening around me. Those qualities had helped me survive. But survival and healing are not the same thing. And eventually, I had to ask myself a difficult question: who am I when I'm not being strong for everyone else? That question eventually led me to write Permission to Break. Many people think that book is about trauma, or policing, or resilience, and those things are certainly part of it, but at its core, the book is really about self awareness. It's about examining the stories we tell ourselves, the masks we wear, the identities we cling to, the survival strategies that once protected us but eventually begin limiting us. Writing that book required me to look at myself honestly, not the version of me that everyone else saw, the real version. The one carrying grief she hadn't fully processed, the one carrying fears she rarely spoke out loud, the one who had become so accustomed to functioning that she no longer knew the difference between surviving and living, the one who was exhausted from carrying responsibilities, expectations, and unspoken burdens, the one who spent years trying to prove she was enough, the one who confused achievement with worthiness, the one who believed strength meant never letting anyone see her struggle, the one who felt responsible for holding everything together, even when she was falling apart herself. And what I discovered was that leadership begins with truth: the truth about who we are, the truth about what we're carrying, the truth about what needs healing, the truth about where we still need to grow. Throughout the trilogy, there were conversations about emotional intelligence, self awareness, humility, and reflection. We talked about the importance of understanding our blind spots and recognizing how our behavior impacts others. As I listened, I realized that self awareness is one of the most difficult forms of leadership because it requires honesty, it requires humility, it requires us to stop blaming everyone else and start examining ourselves. It requires us to ask questions like: why do I react this way? Why do I avoid conflict? Why do I struggle to ask for help? Why do I need to stay busy? Why do I feel responsible for everyone else's happiness? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? Those aren't leadership questions. They're human questions. But maybe that's the point. Maybe leadership is more human than we want to admit, because every conversation about leadership eventually becomes a conversation about identity, about values, about character, about growth, about who we are becoming. The older I get, the more I believe that the hardest person we will ever lead is ourselves. Not because we're incapable, but because we know all of our fears, all of our insecurities, all of our blind spots, all of our excuses. And yet, leadership requires us to keep growing anyway, to keep learning anyway, to keep showing up anyway. For years, I thought leadership meant taking care of everyone else. Today, I believe leadership also means taking care of yourself, not because you're selfish, because you're responsible, responsible for your own growth, responsible for your own healing, responsible for your own well being, responsible for becoming the kind of person capable of serving others without losing yourself in the process. And maybe that's what this entire journey has been teaching me: from therapy, to writing Permission to Break, to creating compassion over silence, to completing the FBI LEEDA Trilogy. The lesson has remained remarkably consistent. Strength matters, but strength alone is not enough. Silence may help us survive, but it rarely helps us heal. And softness is not weakness. Sometimes softness is courage: the courage to be honest, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to ask for help, the courage to grow, the courage to lead yourself with the same compassion you offer everyone else. And maybe that's where leadership truly begins. As I bring this conversation to a close, I've been thinking about what I'll carry forward from the FBI LEADA trilogy. Not the slides, not the models, not the leadership theories, the lessons, the reminders, the things that will continue to shape how I lead long after the training certificates have been filed away. The first lesson is that influence matters more than position. Titles come and go, assignments change, roles change, organizations change, but influence remains. People may comply because of authority, they commit because of trust. And the older I get, the less interested I am in having authority over people, and the more interested I am in positively influencing them. The second lesson is that trust is earned through consistency, not perfection. Consistency, showing up, following through, doing what you say you're going to do, living your values when it's inconvenient, being the same person behind closed doors that you are in public. Trust isn't built in a crisis, it's revealed in a crisis. It's built every day in the small moments nobody applauds. The third lesson is that people matter. That sounds obvious, but it's surprisingly easy to forget. We become busy, focused on outcomes, focused on goals, focused on productivity, focused on getting things done. And sometimes we forget that every organization, every team, every family, and every community is made up of people. People carrying burdens we know nothing about. People navigating challenges behind closed doors. People wrestling with uncertainty, disappointment, grief, and fear. People trying to feel valued, people trying to belong, people trying to matter, people doing their best while carrying more than anyone realizes. And often, people who are struggling the most are still showing up every day, smiling, working, leading, parenting, serving, and convincing the world that they're fine. And leadership requires us to see them, not just for what they produce, but for who they are. The fourth lesson is that accountability is care. For years, I think many of us have been taught that accountability and compassion sit on opposite ends of the spectrum. But I don't believe that anymore. Some of the most caring conversations I've ever had were also some of the most difficult. Accountability isn't about punishment, it's about growth. It's about believing someone is capable of more. It's about caring enough to tell the truth. And it's about helping people become who they're capable of becoming. The fifth lesson, and perhaps the most important one, is that self leadership comes first. Because no matter how many books we read, trainings we attend, or leadership positions we hold, eventually leadership becomes personal. It becomes about character, habits, values, self awareness, growth. It becomes about how we manage ourselves, how we care for ourselves, how we continue evolving into the people we want to become. As I think about the future, I know these lessons will travel with me. They'll travel with me onto the basketball court as I coach young women who are learning not only how to compete, but how to lead. They'll travel with me to the Sunshine Division as we continue serving families throughout our community and reminding people that dignity matters. They'll travel with me as I continue building Black Ember House and creating spaces for healing, leadership, mentorship, and community. They'll travel with me in motherhood as I help guide a daughter who is becoming her own person and finding her own voice. They'll travel with me in my speaking, my writing, and my service. And they'll travel with me in the everyday interactions that rarely make headlines, but often matter most, because that's what leadership really is. It's not a destination, it's not a title, it's not a certificate hanging on a wall, it's not something you arrive at and suddenly master. Leadership is a practice, it's a daily decision, a commitment to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep listening, to keep serving, to keep becoming. And maybe that's the greatest gift of leadership. Not that it changes other people, but that it continually invites us to change ourselves. And that's what I'll carry forward. The biggest lesson I learned from this training wasn't really about leadership. It was about people. People want to be seen. People want to belong. People want to matter. And the longer I live, the more I realize that most of us are asking the same questions, whether we say them out loud or not. Do I matter? Am I valued? Do I belong here? Does anyone see what I'm carrying? Because beneath the titles, the uniforms, the responsibilities, and the roles we play, we're all human beings looking for connection, purpose, and meaning. And maybe that's where leadership begins. Not with authority, not with position, but with our ability to see the humanity in one another. And whether we're leading a team, raising children, serving our communities, or simply showing up for the people we love, the question remains the same. What kind of leader am I becoming? Because long after the titles are gone, long after the positions change, and long after the accomplishments fade, that may be the question that matters most. Leadership isn't something we achieve, it's something we practice, one conversation at a time, one decision at a time, one relationship at a time, one day at a time. And perhaps that's why leadership is never really finished. There's always another lesson, another opportunity to grow, another chance to show up differently, another invitation to become the person we hope to be, not just for the people we lead, but for ourselves. If this conversation resonated with you, follow the podcast, leave a review, and share it with someone who may need it. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Leadership, humanity, honest conversations.